This podcast is supported by the Southern Environmental Law Center, one of the nation's most powerful environmental defenders rooted in the South. Right now, we stand at a crossroads for our environment, and SELC is ready to tackle the challenges ahead. It's ready to hold the line on environmental protections and ready to ensure that people have the clean air, clean water, and healthy climate they deserve, and ready to stand up to powerful interests in the courtroom, the halls of government, and communities across the South. To learn more, visit southernenvironment.org.
Welcome to Nada Yada Island.
We're back on the Nada Yada Island Confessions Show. Benny is about to tell us how he found two loves. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks to Metro, I found iPhone 12 and Apple Watch SE.
At Metro, get the perfect match of both iPhone 12 with 5G and Apple Watch SE for only $99.99. You heard that right. Both for just $99.99. Holidays with Nada Yada Yada. Only at Metro by T-Mobile.
Bring your number and ID, sign up for Metro Flex Plus, and add a watch line. Not available if you're with T-Mobile or been with Metro in the past 180 days. Limit 2 per account.
Terry, we are speaking on the afternoon of Tuesday, December 3rd, East Coast time. What the heck has been happening in South Korea?
Well, it has come as a shock to everyone. I mean, no one has expected or saw this coming.
Terence Roehrig, Terry for short, specializes in Korean security issues at the U.S. Naval War College. Those views are personal, not official government positions.
In a speech, I believe it was about 10:30 p.m. Korea time, the president went on the air and announced that he was declaring martial law.
친애하는 국민 여러분, 저는 북한 공산 세력의 위협으로부터 자유 대한민국을 수호하고
I think most Americans got this push alert about South Korea's president saying martial law was in effect. I feel like my initial response was, what? Like, it just wasn't on my bingo card.
Well, it wasn't. I mean, even for Korea watchers, I don't think we expected it to go to this extent.
President Yoon Yeol's stated reasons for declaring martial law were specious at best. He pointed to enemies within.
He characterized the declaration as fighting against anti-democratic forces, against those who were pro-North Korean.
Does that just mean people who don't agree with me?
Well, and I think that's largely it. The political situation in South Korea has been quite contentious with the election of President Yoon Yeol. He was elected by a very, very small percentage, less than 1% of the vote. And politics have been very contentious in South Korea up to this point.
Has he been basically fighting with his parliament ever since he was elected?
Well, yes. He will be the first South Korean president who has never, in his 5 years in office, had the majority of his own party in the National Assembly.
Within hours of South Korea's president declaring martial law, the parliament was meeting to invalidate the president's declaration. Eventually, Yoon called off the military. And all this happened so fast. Like, someone pointed out on Blue Sky that, if you were South Korean and you went to sleep before 10:30, you will have slept through the declaration of martial law, the parliament meeting to fight it, and then the president giving in and being like, okay, no martial law. Like, you would have missed the whole thing potentially.
Crazy.
Some might see this as like a democratic blip.
Well, I think what's going to be interesting to watch is what the aftermath is from this. Yoon clearly overreached by declaring martial law. But that's not going to be the end of the story. I mean, he just doesn't get to say, oh, my bad, on we go with normal political life. There is going to be, I'm guessing, some degree of accountability that comes from the National Assembly in some shape or form, likely even a demand to impeach the president. But we shall see.
Today on the show, 6 hours on the brink in South Korea. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. This episode is brought to you by Discover. It's always nice to get more for less. So here's a life hack that can automatically put some extra cash in your pocket. Discover will automatically double all the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. So you could get some money for this holiday season and get more next holiday season. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. I want to kind of roll back the clock and help my listeners understand how this all happened in the first place. And I wonder if we should start with maybe a primer on South Korea's president, Yoon Yeol. How long has he been in power? What's his background?
Yeah, he's been in power for about 2 years now, and he was a former prosecutor and got a good deal of notoriety by being the lead prosecutor in the prosecution of the previous president, Park Geun-hye, who was impeached and removed from office for a number of offenses. And so he gained a lot of attention and then ran against Lee Jae-myung from the Democratic Party of Korea and won again in a very, very close election. A third-party candidate, I believe, if she had not run, there's a good chance that Yoon Yeol would have lost. So it was a very close election. He was not popular among the other side of candidates. And so we were ready for a contentious era of Korean politics in the years in his term of office.
Is it fair to say that Yoon's opposition is liberal? I mean, they're called the Democratic Party, so I'm making assumptions here.
Oh, yes. I mean, the political polarization, the political divide between the conservatives and the liberals, which in Korean terminology, they are called the progressives, that their policy differences are very stark. And so they are very significantly polarized in their positions, and compromise is difficult, certainly. And we have seen that in the U.S. system as well. But he has also slid in the direction of what many critics would describe as undemocratic tendencies. That's probably putting it mildly. That he has been very vocal criticizing the press. He has even used government agencies to clamp down on the press in certain ways, raiding offices, surveillance and monitoring of certain journalists, using the phrase fake news to criticize opposition.
Sounds familiar.
Yes, it does.
When Yoon took office, tell me how his opposition, the Democratic Party in South Korea, responded.
Well, they had a majority in the National Assembly and, of course, tried to prevent Yoon from moving on some of his agenda items that he sought to pass.
What did he want to do?
Well, he ended up vetoing a lot of different elements of legislation from the National Assembly. I would also say that some of his economic policies were a concern. And the economy has had some difficulties. Unemployment has been challenging. Youth unemployment in particular, inflation also, and some of these should sound familiar. And so there have been some difficulties in how they would deal with some of those issues, and it has been a big challenge.
When I read about Yoon's history as a leader, the way he's written about, it sort of rhymes with some politicians here in the U.S. Like, I've read about his attacks on the media. I've read that he's used his office to advance his own interests. He allegedly pressured South Korea's Defense Department to whitewash an investigation into the death of a Marine. Is it fair to say this guy, the president of South Korea, is slightly shady?
Well, I think you've raised several of the important issues that are of concern about his administration, what he has done to pressure the media, how he has for a good bit of time protected his wife in some of her influence peddling issues. And he recently, again, came out and apologized for that. But nonetheless, those things still stand. I think there's also an aspect of Yoon is perceived and comes across as an arrogant politician who is not willing to work with the other side of the aisle, that has inflamed and made some of these policy differences that much worse. And rather than compromising and seeking some sort of common ground, has dug his heels in. And so that has just added more fuel to the fire.
2 years into Yoon's presidency, he's had his share of gaffes and scandals. There was the time he visited a grocery store to check on prices, and he commented on how cheap the green onions were, only for it to come out that the store had discounted them before he arrived. There was the Dior bag scandal, where Yoon's wife received a luxury purse from a guest, which many saw as a violation of laws against public servants accepting gifts. The opposition is not blameless here. Its own leader has been indicted on bribery charges and convicted of violating election law. But when voters went to the polls a few months back, it was President Yoon they wanted to punish. When I asked Terry how the results shook out for the president, he was blunt.
Not very well for him. And in this particular case, it was a referendum on him. And a large majority of the opposition politicians were elected in the National Assembly, which ensured that he inherited the majority of the opposition party from his predecessor, Moon Jae-in, and this would have been his chance to get a legislative majority in his own party. But that turned out to not be the case, and so now he is fighting a very large majority against him, which again is making it difficult for his policy agenda to be able to pass.
Do you know what particular fights set off the current crisis?
First of all, the budget was a key issue. He proposed a budget a short time ago, and he was getting a lot of pushback on in regards to funding priorities and things that he was not getting, that there were going to be drastic cuts to the budget that he was proposing from the legislature. There also are a number of impeachment proceedings in play for a number of people within his administration, and possibly more impeachments down the road for others that I think were two of the key elements that probably pushed him over the edge to go this route.
Yeah. In declaring martial law on Tuesday night, what actually happened? Like, what does that set in motion?
Well, the military was ordered in to close down the National Assembly. The National Assembly does not have the powers that it would have under normal political processes, and Yoon could rule much more by fiat from his executive position. And in fact, already the South Korean government, by and large, has a much stronger executive than a lot of other democratic positions. But nonetheless, this would have allowed him to rule much more through his own dictates without the National Assembly and with military support. But of course, one of the keys was, to what degree was the military going to support any of the orders that they would get from the presidential office? Would they obey? Would they not? And then also, what would be the response of the National Assembly? And it all happened so quickly, where the National Assembly was able to gather, vote unanimously for those who showed up. I believe the number was 190 of the 300 legislators made it to the National Assembly building.
And they were like jumping barriers to get there. And then I saw pictures of them putting like couches against the door so the military couldn't stop them from voting.
That's right. The bottom line, and the most important line, is that 190 of the 190 people who showed up voted to overturn and retract martial law. And I think that's an important statement about South Korean democracy.
So now that Yoon has been forced to rescind his martial law order, what's next for him?
This episode is brought to you by NRDC. We all know by now that Trump was elected president, and one thing is paramount. We must fight for our planet. The Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC, is fighting in and out of court to protect the environment, public health, and climate progress from Trump's Project 2025 agenda. NRDC has done it before, and with your help, they'll do it again. During Trump's first term, NRDC filed over 150 lawsuits against Trump's administration and won almost 90% of resolved cases. And this time, they're ready to fight even harder. Despite Trump and his allies' best efforts to pull society backward again, NRDC will work every day to not let them stand in the way of progress. Your support is critical right now. NRDC is not giving up, and with you, they can safeguard our planet for future generations. Donate now at nrdc.org/podcast. All gifts matched for a limited time.
This episode is brought to you by Discover. It's always nice to get more for less. So here's a life hack that can automatically put some extra cash in your pocket. Discover will automatically double all the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. So you could get some money for this holiday season and get more next holiday season. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. Is it weird how uninvolved the United States seems to have been in anything that just happened in Korea? Like, it doesn't seem like anyone in the U.S. really knew that President Yoon was going to do what he did. The president's issued this statement saying, we stand by South Korea in their time of uncertainty. But I don't really know what that means. How do you see that?
Yeah, it is disappointing that the United States was not stronger in its demonstration of support for democracy and concern for the establishment of martial law. This is, in some respects, part of the longer history of U.S.-South Korea relations when these kinds of concerns have happened, that the United States has often been cautious between the support for democracy and the concern for stability, and in some instances even being much more concerned about the stability factor than it was about supporting democracy. And so a story throughout the years of the alliance. But I hope that the administration comes out with a stronger declaration of support for democracy and for democratic process in South Korea to support what the National Assembly and what the South Korean public has done, because I think you cannot just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk as well.
Yeah. As an American, I look at what happened in Korea and I feel like it's like a teachable moment a little bit. Like, the first thing I notice when I lay out all the facts here is the way an opposition party, when empowered, can make things very uncomfortable for an unpopular president. But they have to be pretty bold about it. Like, the opposition in Korea was talking about rolling back the budget, like clawing back money, impeaching multiple people. And then when the president declared martial law, they didn't back down then either. They leapt over some fences and took a vote. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I've never seen anything like that.
Sure. It is a strong statement. And I think that Yoon's own party leader speaks out against it. And that, again, I think the number was about 18 of his party voted with the 190. They were able to get to the National Assembly and support that vote. And I think that is an important bipartisan demonstration of Yoon stepped too far. And this is, he is going to pay a political price for this.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, what could he have been thinking when he declared martial law? Like, he's been fighting with his assembly all year long. Did he just think, if I do this, maybe they'll shut up?
The short answer is I don't know for sure. But I wonder, when you look at how he phrased things, he put it in terms of national security and being pro-North Korean. So he taps into a security narrative that perhaps he thought would have greater appeal. He also framed it as being anti-democratic. And so perhaps he thought framing it in those two ways was going to be a way to garner sufficient support.
Well, they really called his bet over in the legislature, didn't they?
Yes, clearly he blew it on this, and we shall see what the next few days tell us.
Yeah, I feel like it's not looking great for Yoon. The floor leader of the opposition party has called for him to step down. When he declared martial law, he didn't let the chief of his own political party know about it ahead of time, and that person condemned it. So it just seems like he has fewer and fewer friends right now.
Yes, and I think if I had to bet, I think his days are numbered. How long, I don't know. I doubt highly he would finish out his term. I wouldn't be surprised if sometime within the next few months that he either resigns or is impeached.
Yeah. Overnight, thousands of Koreans turned out to protest. The country's largest union called for a general strike. I believe they're asking for him to resign.
Oh, I'm sure. When you look at what's happened, certainly these first few hours were very sad and very concerning about what this meant for democracy. But I think as we have seen this evolve, I think this is going to end up being a very strong statement from South Korea that no, we are a stable, functioning democracy, and we will not tolerate this. That I think many Americans and others forget how young the South Korean democracy is. 1987 was when they had their election to begin their democratic transition. And one of the big measures that you always look for in a new democracy that is transitioning is, when does the opposition party win an election? And will the party in power, that oftentimes is the party that had been in power during military years, at least that was in the South Korean case, are they ready to hand over the keys to the executive department when that change in power happens? And South Korea has weathered that storm a couple of different times. The impeachment of Park Geun-hye a few years ago was another test of South Korean democracy. And you had people turn out in droves in Seoul and other major cities demonstrating for her impeachment and removal from office. And it happened according to domestic procedures, and I think was another important demonstration of the strength of South Korean democracy. I think you will see a similar story written for this as these days go on as well. But it's so important to remember that we just don't know. A lot of this story remains to be written.
Terry, I'm grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, you're welcome, Mary. Thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
Terence Roehrig is a professor of national security affairs at the U.S. Naval War College. He specializes in Korean and East Asian security issues. He was formerly the president of the Association of Korean Political Studies. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Madeline Ducharme, and Anna Phillips. We are led by Alicia Montgomery, with a little boost from Susan Matthews. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Come say hi on Blue Sky if you are hanging out over there. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.